You've just accessed Hardware is Forever, your source for the expert insights, ideas, and innovations you need to do more in the electronics manufacturing industry. From optimization to operations, join us as we put the pieces together for a better approach to manufacturing. Let's go.
This is Hardware is Forever. I am Chris Bintliff, and Jay Patel is the CEO at Amtech, and we're continuing our discussion on the 14 points of management from W. Edwards Deming. And today, as we sort of get into the penultimate, it's principle 13, which is install a strong program of education and self-improvement. This is interesting because we've talked before about the necessity and the value of giving your team the tools they need to succeed, or outlining or templating your systems, or talking through and workshopping the way you do things so that everybody's doing it consistent. So when you see that, a strong program of education and self-improvement, I think install is a really interesting word that Deming uses. I guess what hits you first on that stuff, Jay? Why is this important to Deming, and how does it connect to you as a leader and your philosophies as a leader and your philosophies on leadership?
Yeah, I think when you talk about education, and I think he uses the word install, and I think install is a strong word when you think about it. Install is almost like, yeah, you need it. Like, there is no negotiation in this. There has to be a strong program for education and self-improvement. And the reason for that is, I think, the beautiful thing about us is that, and the industry and human beings is, we innovate and we learn new things, and we're intellectually honest enough to let go of what we've done in the past and implement the newest thing that enhances quality of life and quality to customers. And I think that's where we need to be really, and that's why he says install. When we think about it, like, the industries change year over year. Best practices change year over year. Tools change, whether it's equipment or software, year over year. Approaches change year over year, or even sooner than that. I mean, we're going through currently, and this probably is going to age, but we're going through an AI revolution right now on how to integrate, large language models into our day-to-day processes. And now, if we're not educated in those things and start improving ourselves to be able to use those tools, we are easily going to be out-innovated. And what that happens is that's a failure to our team members, because their livelihood is at stake. They came to us, they trusted us to provide for their family. That's a failure to our customers, because they put a leap of faith in us that we will provide them a short-term and a long-term solution, so they don't have to worry about it, so they can focus on what value and innovation that they need to bring to the market. So if there is not a culture, and if there's not a strong program of education and an emphasis on improvement or growth, now we call it growth mindset, right? Before it was, now the buzzword or the new way of looking at it is growth mindset. If there is not one there, then it really creates risk for our livelihood and whether we would survive or not. Like, are we too narrow-minded that we would rather go down with the ship than change course? And I think the education and self-improvement are those two things that unlock it. Like, there's education, yeah, I'm going to learn it. And there's self-improvement where I'm going to change myself and implement those things so I can do it. So I think without this, you're going to be out-innovated. And we go back to, I may have mentioned it, the Honeywell and Nest. Honeywell had the entire market for thermostats. They were in every house, every residence, every industry. And this upstart Nest somehow connected it to the internet and charged significantly more. And they're out-innovated. Now, Honeywell may have had a business plan, but when looking at it externally, they did not understand and were not educated and did not want to improve to be able to leverage the technologies that's out there. So now they're playing a game of catch-up, which will they succeed in. I mean, they're Honeywell, they will succeed, but it's just a case in point.
I think it's a good illustration of any sort of complacency or flat-footedness, that we can start to experience. Or, yeah, we're working on this and we're 2 years away from it launching. Well, somebody out there is hustling harder. And how does that then for you, I guess, this idea of innovation connect to education? And I want to break Deming's points of education and self-improvement up, because self-improvement is really interesting and I want to get to it in a minute. But so education, the obvious sort of through point there is like, well, we're going to create an education platform for our teams. And this is, again, how we do things or whatever. But what you just described, this idea of innovation, is a broader sense of education, an awareness of other things outside, or of things that aren't just here's how we do things in the organization. Is that part of what you mean by education and what you think Deming meant? We have to have a wider view than just what's going on in our organization?
I think we do need to have a wider view, and you know, I can't know what Deming thought. I'm not Deming, but I can say the value that he adds in education is, even right now when we talk about education, is there's a lot of cross-industry best practices that we can implement in our particular industry, whether, you know, we're in the hardware manufacturing, build to print industry, but we can learn from the software industry on agile development, agile management. How do you implement that? There's a lot of stuff that's learned in, you know, the high reliability industry, is how to manage change. Those type of best practices, if we're not educated on it, we're not going to improve. And when we don't improve, you know, our customers are going to go elsewhere. So I think, you know, education is not only how am I doing our task better, but where is the entire industry or commerce going, or economy going, to be able to stay ahead of things. I think, you know, in the book, Good to Great, I forget the name, but they were a paper company, and they decided to shut down all their paper plants, you know, stop producing paper, and pivoted to some, I think, through to a strictly distribution-based company. And I think that's where education really comes, is when you need to pivot to see where the world is going. And then the self-improvement part of it is like, okay, you take that part, that thing that you've been educated in, and then you implement it in yourself, and then get everybody on the leadership team to buy into that. You know, a good example of that is the iPhone. You know, initially Apple was a computer company, and then they pivoted to, they saw what was coming, and they saw, well, we can get this device that connects the internet with this screen and everything like that. And they educated themselves on where the industry is going. And they created another product that will forever change the way that we humans interact with each other.
And if you, I mean, which then led to the iPad and then the Apple Watch. I mean, so you're right. This idea of change then transforms into new ways of thinking. And then somebody sees the Apple Watch and says, you know what if we took this and we did that? And now there's a new innovation that is born of that. That's a tree with branches, it splinters. And I think I love this idea of, you talked about all the sort of things that are changing, and connecting that to education. I'm mindful, as you're talking about, conversations I have with my daughter who's 16 years old, and I keep reminding her, whatever you're going to do for a living does not exist yet. The principles of it might be here, but it's more important that you know how to think about doing tasks than which exact tasks need to be done. And I feel like that's really connecting with something that you mentioned, which is, yeah, it's important that we teach people how to do their tasks. But if you can understand how to think about it, you will be better prepared for the next thing, whatever that comes up. And for me, that's a segue to this idea of self-improvement, because that feels really subjective. Well, my definition of self-improvement is different than yours, Jay, is different than whatever. How do we install a program of self-improvement inside of our business? How do we do that so that we feel like there's some direction that's consistent, but we allow people to have the latitude and flexibility to be themselves, to learn in their own space?
I think that's where a lot of, again, this goes back to leadership. And you know, that's what these principles are really geared towards, is that we have to lead, and we have to lead by example. So if there are things that other people would be afraid of doing, of changing so drastically and changing so much, we have to be the first ones to say, hey, look, I learned this. Let's implement this. Let's try this out and see what happens. And then if we create that culture of implementing and improving ourselves and the organization or our family, that becomes a normal thing. So then it just kind of starts snowballing. So it all starts with leadership. Again, is we have to be able to, number one, always learn and be dedicated to educating ourselves in the world, everything and anything. I don't know if there's a specific topic that we ever need to be, just having that growth mindset and learning whatever it could be. I mean, I could be in engineering, but I study literature. Like it doesn't make a difference, or philosophy. It doesn't make a difference, but we need to be learning those things and then improving ourselves. And I think that process that people witness of change makes it normal to say, okay, yeah, I can change. I can be a different person. I can learn new things and implement new things. And that trickles down into everything, in the organization.
I think you make a good point. I think curiosity is a characteristic of strong leaders and of strong leadership. Do you have a point of view on, because in so many organizations, if we're thinking about either of these things, sort of self-improvement or education, they come down to like some module you take on your computer or some sort of structured out of the box thing. Or today, everybody, we're going to bring in a speaker who's going to talk to us about, and this kind of stuff has been done in such a way that can be so kind of hokey and cringe that there's a defense mechanism, whether we like it or not, that many of us at work have. So when this stuff comes up, we just tune out or we blow it off or we sort of roll our eyes that we have to do it. It becomes the opposite of what we want, which is, hey, everybody, let's open our minds to what's possible. And it becomes like this thing to sit through. Do you agree with that? And how do you do you have insight or advice on how can we make this a part of our culture in a way that is exciting, not in an artificial way, but that people value rather than sort of, okay, fine, now you're trying to make it so that I'm going to learn about X, Y, Z. What do you do with that tension?
I think right now, the easiest thing to go back to is Deming's 10th point, which is eliminate slogans, cheerleading, and targets.
Nice.
Like you have to, you can't have the theater of education and change.
Nice.
You have to actually imbibe that and demonstrate that in your thoughts and your actions. So then people buy into it. It is not something that can be project planned into existence. It has to be something that is demonstrated.
I worked with a CEO once who was really proud of himself that he never read books. And he sort of just marched around with like this really great innate sense of, he had great sensibilities. And I thought he had a lot to share that was really valuable, but his disinterest in what others were thinking, even to the point so that he could then have an opinion that was in disagreement, but valuable to hear, was frustrating. Do you see that a lot? Do you see the opposite of kind of where you are in this? And again, I bring it back to kind of your station, which is you're a person who reads a lot and watches a lot, and you're trying to always internalize so that in some space, whether it's at work or not, you are on a path of improvement, but not everybody is like that. Do you see that? And how do organizations that are not structured around this place, what is the sort of danger that you see for those kinds of leaders and those kinds of organizations?
So first of all, I don't know your previous CEO. He could have just been a brilliant person and one of those rare breeds that were born with these innate skills that can do it. I mean, there was no Socrates before Socrates. He was the first and only. So to those leaders who can do it, more power to you, and because you deserve it. Like you are of that caliber. So if you can do it and you are that package, great. Now, the thing that is a risk is what happens if you are not the smartest person in the room? What happens if you don't get educated? What is the risk associated with that? And potentially the risk can be catastrophic. If I am not the smartest, if I am the smartest person in the world, great, like good. But in case there is a point where I am not, it is not worth figuring out if I am or not, because the results could be great, but on the other side, the results could be catastrophic. Now, you can still get those great results by educating yourself and validating that, yeah, my skills and my abilities, my outlook are correct. But just in case you do find a concept that you were not educated or did not know of, that could have been your kink in the armor or your Achilles heel that would have led to catastrophe, it was worth it then. So is there any harm in educating yourself and improving yourself? Like, what is the real risk? Right. Like, there's no risk.
Hedge your bets a little bit. I feel like that's a great point of view. And also succession for me comes to mind. So you might be amazing, but whoever's going to be next in your station, like, will your organization have that back to Apple, they have kind of a university that they started building when Steve Jobs was alive, so that some of his leadership tenets could be carried down appropriately, but also, innovated and updated for what's new. Their design language doesn't rely on a single person like Johnny Ive, who used to be the leader of design there, but it now is, it's part of their culture. So part of what I hear you saying, as always, is you have to figure out how is this bigger than you, leader? How does all of this wrap up and sort of surround your entire organization, your entire business?
Not only organization or business or life, or your organization or business is just an aspect of life. Like, there's other things that are significantly far more catastrophic than the ability to develop income or develop money. Like, there are things that are worth significantly more. And if you don't have the right mindset, those avenues can be catastrophic. And there's money you can make, but relationships and time, those things, it's hard to regain those and build those and get, especially time. There's no way you can make more time. That's
a great way to conclude this conversation. Jay Patel is a smart person, and he's the CEO at Amtech, and this is Hardware is Forever. And thanks, Jay. I'm looking forward to our final conversation on Deming coming up.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers and followers. Consider becoming one today wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Hardware is Forever is designed, tested, engineered, and built by the manufacturing experts at Amtech. Learn more and let us help you envision your next project with a free Design for Manufacturing assessment at buildamtech.com/DFM.